My name is Kyrie. I'm the founder at the Risk and Security Open Research Center, and the topic of today's short discussion is governance, risk, and compliance the right career path for you? Many of you are interested in governance, risk, and compliance as a career field to start your cybersecurity journey. So today I'm going to go over what GRC really is, how it relates to cybersecurity, the technical skills that are needed to be an effective GRC professional, as well as the soft skills that are required for this career field. For those of you who are new to GRC, it stands for Governance, Risk, and Compliance. It's a career field that often falls under the umbrella of information security. A lot of people are attracted to this career field because there's a common perception that it's the non-technical version of cybersecurity, and that's something that we're going to talk a little bit about. It is partially true. But be sure to watch this video until the end because I'm really going to break that concept down later, and I'm going to share what I think is the single most important personality trait for a governance, risk, and compliance professional to have. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. I am reading from my notes, full transparency. I'm a much better writer than I am a speaker. So this is how I'm going to be doing my videos. This is what works for me. Sometimes I might go on tangents. The core function of governance, risk, and compliance at an organization is three things, right? So obviously you want to govern the organization, which means to give the organization a sense of direction, mission, and to establish accountability within the organization. That's something else that we're going to talk about in a later video. Establishing accountability is super important. But I'm kind of trying to sweep through this so that we can get to, the personality traits and the technical skills, because I know that's what you guys are here for. The second core function of GRC is to weigh the risk of organization decisions. How much can we gain from this opportunity? How much can we lose in this opportunity, otherwise known as upside and downside risk? And finally, GRC professionals play a major part in ensuring that the organization is compliant with regulations, standards, internal policies, things of that nature. So, the big question that a lot of people ask me is like, okay, there's governance, there's risk and compliance, but what does this actually have to do with cybersecurity? Well, I'll explain. The first lesson that you're going to learn when you're embarking on your cybersecurity journey is the lesson of the CIA triad. I'm sure many of you have heard of the CIA triad, but it stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is basically the whole or the overarching mission of cybersecurity, to ensure that information which is being transmitted digitally, right? That's the key word right there. Information that is being transmitted digitally, and protecting that information is what makes it cybersecurity. Information that's being transmitted through in-person conversation is not cybersecurity, but if you want to keep that information safe, and maybe let's say that you whisper the information to someone, right? You're still keeping that information confidential, but it's not cybersecurity because the information isn't being transmitted digitally. That is considered information security. So that's a big distinction that I want you guys to remember as you embark on your information security / cybersecurity journey. And where was I at here? Oh, okay. So the mission of cybersecurity, CIA triad, to ensure that information which is being transmitted digitally is accessed in a way that is authorized, that the information remains accurate throughout its life cycle, and that it is available to those who need it when they need it. So make sure that the information is available to people in a timely fashion, or available to systems in a timely fashion, right? And that's something that we'll talk about in later videos as well. Now, when we talk about governance, risk, and compliance, you must understand that companies needed to govern their organizations, weigh risk, and stay compliant with laws and regulations prior to the introduction of the internet. Before there was the idea of cybersecurity or this digital space, there was already governance, risk, and compliance. But because in today's time, companies are so reliant on digital infrastructure, a big chunk of the focus of GRC is governing, assessing the risk of, and maintaining the compliance of systems that are rooted in technological processes and driven by digital data. This is where cybersecurity, information security, and GRC sort of come together. That's a concept that I sort of already explained. And real quick, if you're getting value from this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. I'll be going much more in depth about the relationship that I just described in other videos. But now that we have sort of that introduction to GRC out of the way, let's discuss whether governance, risk, and compliance is actually the right career field for you. The first thing that you need to understand is that a GRC role is going to vary based on the size of your organization, based on the type of industry that you're in, and based on the culture of your organization. Sometimes you're only going to be a governance analyst, sometimes you're going to be a risk analyst, and sometimes you're going to be a compliance analyst, or sometimes, like in my case, you're going to be a governance, risk, and compliance analyst where you actually focus on all three things in the same role. Typically, though, when you're focused on all three, it's either just a job title or you're more involved with how the company's governance strategy and methodology actually like functions in the company, meaning you're more focused on how governance, risk, and compliance and how security at the enterprise level runs at the organization, as opposed to doing like targeted risk assessments and targeted compliance assessments. Usually when you're, a risk analyst or a compliance analyst, that's more so where you're going to be doing your targeted assessments. But either way, the technical skills and the soft skills are going to be pretty much the same, regardless of whether you're doing the G, R, and the C or whether you're doing all three. So once you get even more niched down to something like data governance, for instance, right? Obviously, you'll need a more data-focused skill set. And we'll talk about all the different derivatives of governance, risk, and compliance, and all of the career paths that it can lead down to in a later video. In terms of a general technical skill set, right? You're going to need to have a moderate level of understanding of information technology as a whole. So you should understand basic networking concepts, fundamental cybersecurity concepts, a bit of an above average understanding of emerging technologies like cloud and AI. You should also be generally familiar with the system development lifecycle, all things that I will definitely be covering in later videos. Now, these are all the basic skills that I believe every technology professional should have in general, especially if you're going to be working in the information security space. But for the GRC space specifically, it's going to come down to understanding the information security standards like ISO 27000 series, the trust services criteria from the AICPA, as well as risk management frameworks like NIST cybersecurity framework and NIST risk management framework and FAIR, and finally compliance frameworks like CMMC or FedRAMP. Now, in terms of technical skills, these are really all you need to be proficient at the entry level, but it obviously helps to have basic programming and system architecture skills. In my personal opinion, you should be able to at least understand code, and you should have the ability to dissect a security architecture diagram and have an intelligent conversation with different stakeholders at the organization, which brings me to the soft skills portion of this video. And we're going to talk a little bit about the soft skills that you're going to need to be a successful governance, risk, and compliance professional. Typically, people view GRC professionals kind of like they view the police. We're welcome when we welcome when there's a problem that we can fix, but nobody likes to get audited, because an audit is basically an attempt to find gaps in a process, aka find all of the things that people are doing wrong, pointing them out, and then putting them on a slide deck for management to see. But there are a handful of governance, risk, and compliance professionals who understand how to navigate the social atmosphere, how to position themselves as a partner rather than a challenger, how to plan a risk assessment in a way that isn't going to interfere much with the stakeholders' day-to-day work. The really seasoned GRC professionals that I know personally have created the type of reputation for themselves where engineers and architects or other line one professionals are actually excited to hop on calls with them because they see them more as a partner than an adversary. Now, obviously this takes time, But you want to show that you have the capability to be this type of person in your interviews. You need to be personable. You need to have good conflict resolution skills. You need to have integrity and the ability to defend your positions or opinions. And you'll also need decent project management skills. You need to be able to talk to everyone across the organization, from legal to product and engineering teams to finance, and you need to understand how to manage different stakeholder relationships, right? Obviously, the chief information security officer doesn't want or need the same information as the engineers who aren't necessarily on that strategic level at the organization, right? The engineers are typically the ones who are down in the weeds actually doing the work, whereas the CISO is going to be more high level. So those stakeholders require different types of information. They have different presentation styles, different cadences on how they work, etc. And it's going to be important for you to know that as a governance, risk, and compliance professional. So now I want to talk about, what I think, in my opinion, is the single most important personality trait for a governance, risk, and compliance professional to have. Being able to look at a large process and compartmentalize it into smaller organized chunks is the most vital skill that you can have when you're conducting a risk assessment, writing a new org policy, or doing a compliance audit. I call this being a systems thinker. The value of the GRC practitioner is that we bring the visibility and context of the rest of the organization to every situation that we're involved in. So we know what this engineering team is doing over here and how it might affect this finance team over here, because we serve both of these teams as our internal clients. Lean methodology it kind of ties into this concept of being like a systems thinker. I think that is one of the most underrated skill sets that I don't think is ever really talked about for security professionals. Being able to look at a system or process, see the weaknesses and inefficiencies, and weigh the risk of mitigating those weaknesses and inefficiencies is a skill that organizations pay people like me 6 figures to do. If you want to learn more about risk and security, be sure to subscribe to this channel and leave me a question in the comments about topics of concepts that you want me to elaborate on more. And be sure to follow me on my other social media platforms where I go live sometime or do exclusive learning and career opportunities. Until next time, peace.